My money paid for this house, so you get out, he screamed. And in that single brutal moment, the entire world I had built shattered. The sound of his voice, laced with a venom I'd never heard before, echoed off the high ceilings of our Brooklyn brownstone, a home I thought was our shared dream, but that I now understood was just a stage for a play I didn't know I was acting in. Before that morning, my life it looked perfect from the outside. I'm Claire, and I own a moderately successful interior design firm in the city. I'm the woman who can find the exact shade of gray to make a room feel like a sanctuary, the one who knows that the right lighting can change not just a space, but a mood. I built my business from nothing, pouring my heart and my savings into it. That business paid for this house, for the marble countertops Marcus insisted on, for the vintage leather armchair in his study, for the life he so proudly showed off to our friends. To everyone else, we were the ideal couple. He was the charming, ambitious husband, and I was the creative, supportive wife. We hosted dinner parties where the wine flowed as freely as the laughter. No one saw the cracks forming beneath the polished hardwood floors. Not even me. But his words that morning ripped the beautiful wallpaper right off the walls, exposing the rot under. This is the story of how I discovered that the man I loved was not just a liar and a cheat, but a thief plotting to leave me with nothing. It's the story of how I went from heartbroken to furious, and from a victim to the architect of his downfall. This is a long story, and I might need a friend to see it through. If you want to be sure you hear how it all ends, stick around for the next part. You won't want to miss what I found behind his locked door. The front door slammed shut, and the sound was so final, so absolute, that it felt like it had sucked all the air out of the house. I just stood there in the middle of our foyer, my bare feet cold against the Italian tile I'd picked out myself. My heart was hammering against my ribs, trapped. I could still hear ugly and sharp. My money paid for this house, so you get out. It was a lie, a ridiculous, blatant lie. My inheritance, my business profits, they were the foundation. He knew it. I knew. But the way he'd said it, with such conviction, I didn't cry. The shock was too deep for tears. It was more like my entire short circuit. I felt just a low, humming buzz in my ears and a strange, detached curiosity about what I was supposed to do next. Make coffee, get dressed, pretend the last 10 minutes of my life hadn't happened. My feet started moving before my brain. I drifted down the hallway, my hand trailing against the cool plaster wall. I passed the living room, filled with furniture I had sourced and restored. I passed the photos on the console table, us smiling in Tuscany, us laughing on a sailboat in Maine. It all felt like a scene from someone else's life. Then I was standing in front of his office, his sanctuary. The one room in the house that was completely off limits. He always kept it locked. Always. He'd made a joke about it once, saying his genius needed absolute solitude. I remember laughing, thinking it was just one of his little quirks. Now, it didn't feel like a quirk. It felt like a vault. But that morning, something was different. The oak door was slightly ajar. A sliver of light cut through the dim hallway. My breath caught in my throat. He never left his office unlocked. In all the years we'd lived here, it had never happened. He must have been in such a rage when he left that he'd forgotten. My hand trembled as I pushed the door open. The room smelled like that expensive cologne that mixed with the scent of old books and leather. Everything was perfect as I'd imagined. A massive mahogany desk, polished to a high shine. Books arranged by color on the shelves. Not a single thing out of place, except for one. There, sitting in the dead center of his otherwise empty desk, was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a work document or a contract. It was a credit card statement. My stomach clenched. It was a high-end platinum card, the kind that comes with a personal concierge. It was in his name, Marcus Thorne. But it was an account I had never, ever seen. We had joint accounts for everything. Everything. My fingers felt numb as I picked it up. It was crisp. My eyes scanned the list of charges, and the buzzing in my ears grew louder. A charge for over $2,000 at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami. The date was from 3 weeks ago, a time he'd supposedly been at a tech conference in Chicago, complaining to me on the phone about the terrible weather and the boring seminars. Another charge, a staggering 5-figure sum from a famous jeweler on Collins Avenue. Then, 2 days at a luxury spa, and a week-long rental from an exotic car company. A bright red Ferrari, to be exact. The world tilted. Chicago. He had described the bland conference room, the bad hotel food, the snow. He'd built an entire fictional trip, complete with details, all while he was in Miami, living a life I couldn't even fathom, Spending money spending money I had earned. The lie was so comprehensive, so audacious, it almost didn't feel real. It wasn't just a lie about where he was, it was a lie about who he was. This piece of paper wasn't just a bank statement, it was a passport to a secret life. And as I stood there in the silent, cold dread washed over, this wasn't just a crack in the foundation of our marriage. The whole damn thing was a facade. And I was just beginning to see how deep the rot went. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the credit card statement twice. It floated to the floor, landing face up like an accusation. Miami. The name of the jewelry store, the Ferrari, the words swam in front of my eyes. For a few minutes, I just paced his office, a caged animal, my mind racing in 100 different directions. Was this new? Was it a one-time thing? Who was she? The questions were a swarm of angry bees in my head. I needed an anchor. I needed Jessica. I grabbed my cell phone, my thumb hovering over her name. Jessica and I have been friends since college. She's the kind of person who knows exactly what to say. Not because it's what you want to hear, but because it's what you need to hear. She's also a razor-sharp corporate lawyer who deals with messy, high-stakes deception for a living. My voice was a raw whisper when she answered. I didn't even say hello. I just choked out his name. Marcus. She went quiet, instantly on high alert. I told her everything. The fight, his cruel words, the unlocked door, the statement. I expected gasps, sympathy, outrage. I didn't get any of that. What I got was better. Her voice came through the phone, calm and steely. She told me to breathe. She said that a man who builds a lie that elaborates is hiding more than an affair. He's hiding a strategy. She told me to stop thinking like a heartbroken wife and start thinking like I was preparing for war. Her advice was precise. She told me about a piece of software, a program that could recover deleted files from a hard drive. She said people get arrogant. They think hitting delete is enough. They get sloppy. She told me to go to our shared desktop computer, the one in the upstairs study, and run the program. Whatever you do, Claire, she had warned, her voice low and urgent, do not let him know you suspect a thing. From this moment on, you are an actress in the role of your life. Hanging up, I felt a strange sense of purpose cutting through the fog of pain. War. She was right. This was a war. I went to the study, my steps silent on the carpeted stairs. The whole time, I felt like a criminal in my own home, my ears straining for the sound of his key in the lock. The shared computer sat on a desk I'd designed, a beautiful piece of reclaimed wood. It felt tainted now. I downloaded the software Jessica had texted me a link for, my hands flying across the installation bar filled up with an agonizing slowness. Then I clicked scan. The program whirred to life. A progress bar appeared on the screen, a thin green line that seemed to mock me with how slowly it moved. 10%, 20%. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, watching my own ghostly reflection in the dark screen. I looked pale, haunted. The house was completely silent around me, but in my head, a storm was raging. After nearly 2 hours, a small window popped up. Scan complete. 1082 deleted files recovered. My heart leapt into my throat. A new folder had appeared on the desktop, innocuously labeled Recovered. I clicked it. It was a chaotic jumble of documents, old downloads, and image files with cryptic names. I started at the top, opening the images one by one. The first few were nothing. Old memes, website screenshots. And then I opened the fourth one. It was a photo. Marcus. He was standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, arm wrapped tightly around a woman. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her dark hair catching the light. She was beautiful, but it wasn't her beauty that made my stomach drop to the floor. It was the look on his face. He was gazing at her with an expression of pure, unguarded adoration. A look he hadn't given me in years. I clicked the next one. It was them again, this time clinking champagne glasses on a balcony overlooking the canals of Venice. The next, they were kissing, silhouetted against a fiery sunset in Santorini. My mind reeled, trying to place the dates. The Venice trip, that was when he was supposedly on a leadership retreat in the mountains of Colorado. The Santorini trip, that was when his father had a health scare and he needed to fly to Ohio for lie after lie after lie. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a whole other life. A grand romantic tour of Europe, built on a foundation of his deception and my money. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was living a double life. And the most sickening part of it all was, looking at the joy on his face in those pictures, I wasn't even sure which life was the real one, and I must have stared at those photos for an hour, just clicking from one to the next. Paris, Venice, Santorini. Image was a fresh stab of the way he looked at the easy intimacy in their posture. It was a performance of the life I thought we. My grief was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Me wanted to smash the monitor, to delete the images and pretend they didn't exist. But another part, a cold, hard part I barely recognized, knew I had to keep going. The pictures were the what. I needed to understand the why and the how. I forced myself to close the image viewer and went back to the chaotic folder of recovered files. I scrolled past more photos, my stomach, and focused on the documents. Most were meaningless, old receipts, drafts of work emails, but then I saw a subfolder that had been recovered. The name was simple, just his initials, MT. Inside were a handful of email files. My finger hovered over the mouse. This felt different. This felt dangerous. I clicked on the it was a chain. A conversation between Marcus and a name I didn't recognize. Arthur Vance with S gears after it. An attorney. The subject line made my blood run cold. Strategy for asset division. My heart started that frantic hammering again. I read the first email. It was from Marcus, dated 2 months ago. He wrote about wanting to secure his future and protect his assets in the event of a dissolution of partnership. It made it sound so clinical, so detached. Like he was talking about a business merger, not a marriage. As I scrolled down, reading the attorney's replies, the legal language started to form a picture of pure evil. They were talking about our house, my house. The lawyer was advising Marcus on the best way to claim sole owner. I saw my own name, my company's name, mentioned over and over. They were dissecting my finances, my inheritance from my parents, the profits from my design firm that I had poured into the down payment and the renovations. And then I saw the phrase that made the world stop. The lawyer outlined the core of their strategy. He advised Marcus to argue that all the money I had invested in our home and our life was not a shared marital asset, but a gift. A gift. My sweat, my work, Lee's legacy, I had someone who was currently spent another one. A carefully constructed, legally backed plan to not just cheat on me, not just leave me, but to strip me of everything, to leave me with nothing but the clothes on my back. His outburst that morning suddenly made perfect, sickening sense. My money paid for this house. It wasn't just a burst of anger. It was a line, a rehearsed line fed to him by his lawyer. It was the first shot in a war he had been planning for months. The photos hurt. But this was different. This was annihilation. This was a man I had loved, a man I had built a life with, meticulously plotting my destruction. The affair wasn't the goal. It was just a perk he enjoyed along the way. The goal was the money. My money. The last of the grief inside me finally burned away, leaving something else in its place. It was a cold, sharp, and terrifyingly clear feeling. Fury. The kind of fury that doesn't scream, but gets very quiet. The tears that welled in my eyes weren't for the man I had lost. They were for the fool I had. He didn't just want to break my heart. He wanted to erase my entire... And as I sat there, bathed, I made a vow. He would live to regret the day he decided I was the hardest thing I've ever had to do was walk out of the study and go back to loving. My body was I wanted to pack a bag and run. I wanted to confront him, to throw the printouts of his secret life in his face. But Jessica's words echoed in my head. From this moment on, you are an actress in the role of your life. So, I took a deep breath, splashed cold water on my face until the redness around my eyes faded, and I began my performance. The next few days were a masterclass in self-control. When Marcus came home from work, I was there to greet him with a smile. The scent of his cologne, the one I used to love, now smelled like deceit. When he kissed my cheek, I had to fight every muscle in my body that wanted to recoil. We sat at the dinner table, the one I'd spent a month sourcing from an antique fair, and I would ask about his day. He would talk about spreadsheets and deadlines, all the mundane details of a life I now knew was a complete fiction. I would nod and listen and ask questions, all while the images of him in Paris were burned into the back of my mind. It was exhausting. I felt like I was holding my breath, only able to exhale in the few hours I was alone in the house, where I'd retreat to the study and pore over the evidence, my alliance with Jessica growing stronger with every call. She was my director, my strategist. She advised me to copy every file onto a secure hard drive, to document everything. Slowly, Methodically, we were building a case. The most difficult part was the physical closeness. One night, as we were lying in bed, he rolled over and put his arm around me. He let out a contented sigh, his breath warm on my neck. He said something about how stressed he'd been and how coming home to me was the only thing that kept him sane. The hypocrisy was so staggering, it was almost comical. I lay there, rigid in the dark, my mind racing. I could feel the heat of his body, and all I could think about was the cold calculation in his emails. He was sleeping next to the woman he was planning to destroy, and he had no idea she was wide awake. The slip-up was so small I almost missed it. We were having breakfast on Saturday. I was pretending to read the pin. He was talking about his upcoming birthday. He was in a strangely good mood, expansive and confident. He mentioned wanting to do something big this year, not just our usual quiet dinner. He said he wanted to throw a real party here at the house. He told me he felt like he was on the verge of a major breakthrough in his life, and he wanted to celebrate it with everyone. Then he looked at me, a smug little smile playing on his lips, and he said the words that made my blood freeze. "It's time for a new beginning, you know? For us, a real fresh start. New beginning." It wasn't the exact phrase from the emails, but it was the same scent, the same arrogant, self-serving poison, gift-wrapped as a romantic promise. He wasn't talking about our new beginning. He was talking about his, the one he was planning to fund with my life's work. He thought his plan was so close to succeeding that he couldn't help but boast about it, right to my face. He saw me as a prop in his victory, the smiling, oblivious wife who would soon be thrown out on the street. I looked up from the newspaper and gave him the warmest smile I could muster. "That's a wonderful idea, honey," I said, my voice perfectly even. "You deserve it. We'll invite everyone. Your partners, your family, all our friends. We'll make it a night no one will ever forget." Completely satisfied, convinced of his own brilliance, he had no idea that I agreed with him. It would be a night no one would ever forget, because he had just handed me the stage, the audience, and the perfect occasion to bring the curtain down on his entire fraudulent life. The party planning became my perfect cover. I dove into it with a convincing, almost manic enthusiasm. I spent my days on the phone with caterers, florists, and musicians, playing the part of the doting wife obsessed with celebrating her husband. Marcus was thrilled. He saw my flurry of activity as proof of his success, of my devotion. He had no idea that for every call I made about canapes, I made another to Jessica. For every hour I spent tasting cakes, I spent 3 more locked in the study, digging deeper into the digital tomb of our marriage. The initial shock of his betrayal had settled into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I had the what, the affair, the secret life. I had the how, the legal plot to steal my assets. But I was still haunted by the why. Why this level of destruction? Why try to annihilate me? It felt like there was a missing piece, a primary domino that had started this entire cascade of lies. I shared this feeling with Jessica. I told her that underneath his recent arrogance, I could sense a current of something else, something frantic. She suggested that his personal treachery might be a symptom of a different kind of problem. She advised me to stop looking at him as a husband and start looking at him as a business that might be failing. So, my investigation changed course. I turned my attention away from the romantic emails and vacation photos and toward the driest, most boring corner of his life, company. He ran a small tech consulting firm that he always portrayed as wildly successful. It was his pride and joy, the source of his smug confidence. Using a list of old passwords he'd kept in a desk, passwords he was too arrogant to ever to explore the architecture of his profession. For 3 nights in a row, after he was sound asleep, I slipped into the study and logged into his corporate accounts. I waded through folders of invoices, payroll records, and client correspondence. It all looked normal on the surface. But Jessica had told me to look for what wasn't there. Big new clients, recent contract renewals. His business seemed to have stalled about a year ago. The real discovery came when I gained access to his private business bank account portal. There, buried in a digital file cabinet of official correspondence, I found it. It wasn't one thing. It was a series of them. Scanned letters from the IRS, each one more threatening than the last, referencing unpaid payroll taxes and threatening a massive lien on the business. Then, a string of increasingly frantic notifications from his bank regarding a business loan the size of a small mortgage. The final letter was blunt, a formal notice of default. The blood drained from my face. His company wasn't just struggling. It was a ghost, a hollowed-out shell, moments away from total collapse. He was bankrupt, or at least, he was about to be. Suddenly, everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. And to steal my house, my assets, it wasn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It was a bailout, a desperate, malicious, all-or-nothing gambit to save himself. He wasn't trying to build a new life with his mistress. He was trying to steal mine to replace the one he had already destroyed through his own failure. His fight with me, the line about his money, it was all the desperate posturing of a failed king trying to conquer a neighboring kingdom before his own people found out his castle was made of sand. He wasn't a monster born of pure greed. He was a coward, terrified of being exposed as the failure he truly was, and he was willing to burn my entire world to the ground just to keep himself warm for a little while longer. The realization didn't fill me with a new kind of icy resolve. He wasn't just a cheater and a liar. He was a drowning man, and he was trying to use my body as a life raft. Knowing about Marcus's financial ruin, it was like finding the key to his entire personality. His arrogance wasn't born from success. It was a shield to hide his failure. His lies weren't just for fun. They were a desperate scramble to keep his head above water. This new understanding didn't soften. He was a cornered animal, which meant he was unpredictable and dangerous. I relayed my findings to Jessica. She was quiet for a long moment on the other end of the line. She confirmed my fears, explaining that his impending bankruptcy could actually make the divorce messier. He would be more desperate than ever to lay claim to my assets, to argue that my gifts were all that stood between him and total ruin. His lawyers would likely try to paint him as a victim. The game had become more complex, the stakes infinitely higher. It was then that a memory surfaced, a piece of my past I hadn't thought about in years. My father. He had been a brilliant, self-made man, but he was also deeply cautious. He'd liked Marcus well enough on the surface, but I remember him once making an offhand comment about Marcus being more interested in the finish than the foundation. Before my father passed away, he had insisted on setting up a trust. At the time, I'd thought it was just standard estate planning, a formality. Now, I wondered, I needed to know exactly where I stood. I needed to see Mr. Davison. He had been my father's lawyer for over 30 years, a man who seemed to be carved from the same granite as the old city buildings his office was housed in. I told Marcus I had a consultation with a potential new client in Midtown, a lie that slipped off my tongue with unnerving ease. Walking into Mr. Davison's office felt like stepping back in time. The air smelled of wood polish and old paper. The walls were lined with leather-bound books that looked like they contained the secrets of the city. He greeted me with a sad, knowing look in his eyes, as if he'd seen this story play out 1,000 times before. I sat across from his enormous desk, and in a low, steady voice, I told him everything. I left out the emotional wreckage and stuck to the facts. The secret life, the mountain of debt, and the legal strategy to declare my assets a gift and seize our home. He listened without interruption, his hands steepled on his desk, his gaze unwavering. When I finished, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. He didn't offer condolences. He offered strength. He stood, walked over to a massive safe, and returned with a thick, leather-bound portfolio. My name was embossed on the cover in gold. He opened it, and the weight of the paper, the crispness of the ink felt like a shield. He explained the structure of the trust my father had created. The language was dense, but the meaning was simple and beautiful. My father had set it up as an irrevocable trust, a separate legal entity. Everything I had inherited, and more importantly, a significant portion of my business profits that were funneled into it each year, were legally the property of the trust, not me. He had structured it specifically to be untouchable by any marital claims or creditors. My father, in his quiet wisdom, had seen a potential storm on the horizon years ago, and had built me an ark. Marcus couldn't touch it. His lawyers could argue about gifts all day long. It wouldn't matter. The money that had paid for the vast majority of our life wasn't a gift from a wife to a husband. It was an investment made by a trust that Marcus had no legal connection to whatsoever. A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me. But Mr. Davison wasn't finished. His expression shifted from professional to personal. He said he considered Marcus's plan not just a legal maneuver, but a grave insult to my father's memory. He then told me that his firm would represent me in the coming fraud case, and that they would do so without a fee. He considered it a matter of honor. I walked out of that oak-paneled office and back onto the loud, chaotic streets of Manhattan, feeling like I had an army at my back. The fear that had been my constant companion for weeks was finally gone, replaced by a cold, diamond-hard certainty. Marcus thought he was playing a game against a woman he had isolated and broken. He had no idea he was actually picking a fight with the ghost of a man who had loved his daughter enough to protect her from beyond the grave, and it was a fight Marcus had already lost. With my father's trust confirmed, impenetrable fortress, the final pieces of the puzzle began to snap into place, was gone. All that remained was a sharp, crystalline focus. The time for reacting was over. It was time to direct the final act of this trap. The birthday party was no longer just a date on the calendar. It became my obsession, my singular focus. It was the battlefield I had chosen, and I was going to choreograph every single moment of the coming conflict. My days were a blur of calculated deception. To Marcus, I was the perfect hostess, confirming guest counts and debating the merits of jazz trios versus string quartets. He'd watch me, a proud smile on his face, seeing only the wife who adored him. He had no idea he was watching his own executioner sharpen the axe. My real work happened in the quiet hours of the night. My study was now a war room. I was in constant communication with my two generals, Jessica, my expert in psychological warfare, and Mr. Davison, my master of legal strategy. Together, we planned a three-pronged attack. Mr. Davison's team worked with quiet efficiency, drafting the divorce petition and a comprehensive fraud lawsuit, complete with every piece of evidence I had uncovered. The documents were a work of art, a legal monument to Marcus's deceit. Jessica's role was to help me craft the centerpiece of my plan, the weapon of mass humiliation, the surprise video. We spent hours in front of my laptop, sifting through the wreckage of my marriage. At first, seeing the photos still brought a dull ache to my chest, but with Jessica by my side, the pain receded, replaced by a cold, tactical precision. We weren't looking at memories anymore. We were looking at evidence. We laid it all out, storyboarding the downfall of Marcus Thorne. We decided to start softly. The video would begin with a montage of our life, the one everyone believed we had. Happy photos from our wedding, from holidays, from dinners with the very friends who would be in the audience. We'd set it to the gentle acoustic song that had been our first dance. The goal was to draw them in, to make them feel the warmth of the life he was about to lose. Then, at the song's emotional peak, a sudden jarring cut to silence. An image of the Santorini sunset would fill the screen, beautiful and serene. Then it would slowly zoom out to reveal him kissing her. From there, it would be a rapid, brutal assault. The affair photos, one after another, Paris, Venice, Miami. Then, the screenshots of the secret credit card statement with the most obscene charges, the jeweler, the Ferrari, the five-star hotels, circled in a thick, blood-red line. Finally, the knockout blow. We took the most damning phrases from his emails with his lawyer and blew them up on the screen in stark white text against a black background. Dissolution of partnership. Strategy to secure my future. And the final, most poisonous line of all, her financial contributions to be argued as a gift. I rented a professional-grade projector and a massive cinema-style screen. When Marcus saw it being set up, his ego swelled. He thought it was all for him, a grand gesture of my love. He actually clapped his hands together, thrilled at the idea of his life being projected for all to see. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. The last piece was the timing. Mr. Davison had arranged for a process server to be waiting in a car just down the block from our house on the night of the party. He would be on standby, waiting for a single text message from me. The night before the party, I stood alone in the living room. The caterers had already dropped off the tables. The florist had filled the space with white lilies that smelled like a funeral. Everything was pristine, beautiful, and ready. It looked like a party, but it wasn't. It was a stage, a perfectly designed trap. Marcus was expecting a celebration of the man he pretended to be. I was about to introduce the world to he was. The day of the party arrived with a strange, surreal stillness. The house, usually filled with the sounds of our life, was quiet, holding its breath. Outside, the sky was a loudly perfect day for a demolition. Marcus was electric with excitement, a child on Christmas. He walked around the house, adjusting pictures on the wall, polishing the already gleaming silverware, a broad, triumphant smile plastered on his face. He was the king surveying his castle, completely unaware that the walls were about to come crashing down around him. I, on the other hand, felt a profound and unnerving calm. The frantic anxiety of the past few weeks had vanished, replaced by a singular, sharp clarity. I moved through the day with a deliberate slowness, my mind a quiet space where the plan replayed on a continuous loop. Check the projector, cue the video file, my phone fully charged, Jessica and Mr. Davison on standby, the process server's number ready to go. Every step was choreographed, every contingency planned for. There was nothing left to do but wait for the curtain to rise. That evening I got ready for the party as if I were preparing for battle. I chose my armor, a simple, elegant dress in a deep blood red. It was a dress Marcus had never seen. I styled my hair and did my makeup with a steady hand, looking at my own reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different. The softness was gone from her eyes, replaced by something harder, something forged in pain and fury. I wasn't the woman he married. I was the woman he had created. Just as I was finishing, Marcus walked into the bedroom already dressed in a tailored suit. He stopped short when he saw me. He told me I looked breathtaking, that I had outdone myself. He came up behind me and put his hands on my shoulders, his eyes meeting mine for a terrifying second, seeing us framed together like that, a ghost of the past. I saw the look in his eyes, the smug, possessive pride of a man admiring his most valuable possession, and the ghost vanished. As he turned to straighten his tie, his phone, which he'd left on the dresser, buzzed. Then it buzzed again, and again, a rapid series of notifications lighting up the screen. From where I stood, I could see the name at the top of the messages. It was her, the woman from the photos. Marcus's cheerful expression faltered just for a second. A shadow of irritation crossed his face. He snatched the phone, his thumb moving furiously across the screen. He shot me a tight, forced smile and said he needed to take a quick business call, then disappeared into the ensuite bathroom, shutting the door firmly behind him. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the cadence of his voice. A low, angry, hushed whisper. A slow smile touched my lips. The alliance was cracking. She was likely getting impatient, making demands, choosing the worst possible moment to remind him of her existence. The great puppet master was struggling to keep his puppets from tangling their strings. He wasn't in control. He was juggling, and the balls were beginning to drop. That tiny crack in his perfect facade gave me a final, exhilarating surge of strength. He emerged a few minutes later, his composure restored, his party smile back in place. But I had seen the flicker of panic, and I knew. He was already losing. Just then, the deep, melodic chime of the doorbell echoed through the house. The first guests had arrived. I took one last look in the mirror, straightened my shoulders, and turned to face him. He held out his arm for me to take. I placed my hand on his sleeve, my touch light. My nails painted the same deep red as my dress. It was time. The party was a resounding success. Our home was filled to the brim with the people who made up our world. Marcus's business partners, looking sleek and successful, his parents beaming with pride, our mutual friends laughing and sharing stories. The air buzzed with energy, with the clinking of champagne flutes and the smooth sounds of the jazz trio I'd hired. Marcus was in his element. He moved through the crowd like a conquering hero, accepting pats on the back, laughing his big, booming laugh, a glass of expensive scotch perpetually in his hand. He was magnetic, charming, the picture of a man who had everything he'd ever wanted. I watched him from across the room, a faint, placid smile on my face. I played my part beautifully. I was the gracious hostess, the adoring wife, making sure glasses were filled, greeting every guest with warmth, my crimson dress a splash of color in a sea of black and gray. To anyone watching, we were the perfect couple, hosting the perfect party. After the main course was served and the initial buzz had settled into a comfortable hum, I knew it was time. I walked to the front of the living room where the massive white screen stood waiting. I tapped the microphone gently, and a soft chime silenced the crowd. "Hi, everyone," I began, my voice steady and warm. All eyes turned. I saw Marcus look over, a proud, loving smile on his face. "Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate my amazing. This has been a big year of growth." Letting my eyes. Marcus has been talking a lot lately about new beginnings, and it inspired me to do something special. I wanted to put together a little surprise to honor the journey that brought him to this incredible. I gave a small nod to a friend I'd hired who was standing discreetly by the laptop. The lights dimmed and the projector whirred to life. The first images filled the screen. Us on our wedding day. us renovating the brownstone, covered and laughing, Christmases with his family, summer vacations in Maine. A gentle, familiar song played in the background. The room was filled with soft sighs and appreciative smiles. I could feel Marcus's chest swell with pride beside me, where he'd come to stand, his arm wrapping possessively around my waist. The song reached its crescendo. The final image of the happy montage, us kissing on New Year's Eve, faded out. And then, silence. The Santorini sunset filled the screen. For a second, there were murmurs of appreciation at the beautiful shot. But then, the frame slowly pulled back, revealing Marcus, locked in a passionate kiss with a woman who was not me. A single, collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and immediate. Marcus's arm fell from my waist. I could feel the heat leave his body as the blood drained from his face. But the video was just getting started. It was a brutal, relentless assault. A photo of them in Paris, her wearing a stunning new necklace. A close-up of the credit card statement, the 5-figure charge from the jeweler on Collins Avenue circled in red. A shot of them laughing in a red Ferrari, the rental charge highlighted, the pictures from Venice, from Miami, one after another. A rapid-fire catalog of his secret life. The murmurs in the crowd had stopped. There was only a thick, horrified silence. People stared, frozen, their wine glasses halfway to their lips. Then came the final act. The black screens, the white text, the excerpts from his emails to his lawyer. Dissolution of partnership. The words hung in the air, cold and clinical. Strategy to secure my future. And then, the phrase that I knew would damn him completely. Her financial contributions to be argued as a gift. The screen went black for a moment before a final image appeared. It wasn't a photo. It was the elegant, unmistakable logo of my father's law firm. Below it, the text was simple, professional, and utterly devastating. Notice of pending legal action. Charges include civil fraud and conspiracy to defraud. The video ended, leaving that final slide illuminated, casting a cold white light on Marcus's stunned face. He looked from the screen to me, his mouth opening and closing. But no words came out. His confident mask had been shattered, revealing the pathetic, terrified man under. I stepped forward and took the microphone, my movements calm and deliberate. I turned to face my voice didn't shake. It was as clear as ice. "Darling," I said, the word dripping with venom. "I have so much money to spend. I do hope you've saved enough for your lawyer." As my words echoed in the dead, a path silently, a tall, impassive man in a suit, a man no one had invited, walked directly toward the center of the room. He didn't look at anyone but Marcus. He stopped, extended a thick manila envelope, and placed it in Marcus's trembling hand. Then, he turned and walked out, leaving a wake of stunned silence behind him. Marcus stood there, paralyzed, holding the divorce papers and the fraud summons. The party music was gone. The laughter was gone. All that was left was the hum of the projector, 100 pairs of eyes, and the ruins of a life he had just lost. The silence that followed the process server's exit was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It was a vacuum, filled with the weight of 100 unblinking stares. No one moved. No one spoke. Marcus stood frozen in the center of the room, a ghost at his own funeral, the legal papers hanging from his limp. Then, slowly, the spell broke. It began with one person, then another, quietly placing their napkin on the table and rising. There was no drama, no shouting, no taking sides. There was just a quiet, dignified, and total exodus. His business partners, the men he so desperately wanted to impress, walked out without a single backward glance. His parents were the last to leave, their faces etched with a shame so deep it was painful to watch. His mother wouldn't even look at me. She just stared at her son, the stranger in the expensive suit, before her husband gently guided her out the door. In less than 10 minutes, the house was empty. It was just the two of us left, standing in the ruins of the party. He was surrounded by half-eaten plates of expensive food, melting ice sculptures, and the ghost of a life that was no longer his. He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading, searching for an explanation, an excuse. There was nothing left. The man I had loved was gone, and the man standing in his place was someone I didn't know at all. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply looked at him one last time, and what I felt was not hatred, but a profound, and I turned without a word, walked up the stairs to the guest bedroom I had already prepared for myself, and locked the door behind the morning. The aftermath was swift. As I learned through Jessica and Mr. Davison, Marcus's world didn't just crumble, it vaporized. His business partners dissolved their contracts the very next day. His firm, already drowning in debt, sank like a stone. The bank foreclosed. The mistress, whose name I made a point never to learn, disappeared the moment she realized his secret credit card was cut off and his future was a black hole of litigation. He lost his job, his reputation, and his friends in a single night. The legal battle was laughably one-sided. The evidence I had was so overwhelming that his lawyers, after one look at the fraud case Mr. Davison had built, advised him to settle immediately and quietly. The divorce was finalized in record time. I kept the house, I kept my business, I kept the trust, I kept my dignity. He walked away with his clothes and the crushing weight of his own choices. The day his movers came to collect the last of his things was the first day of my new life. After the truck pulled away, I walked through the silent rooms. The house felt bigger, lighter. His presence had been a heavy, oppressive weight I hadn't even noticed until it was gone. I walked into his office, that forbidden room where my nightmare had begun. The first thing I did was call a junk removal service to haul away his massive, imposing mahogany desk and that ridiculous leather armchair. In the weeks that followed, I reclaimed the space. I painted the walls a warm, bright white. I filled the shelves not with his boring business books, but with my own art books, with plants, with color and life. The house slowly transformed from a crime scene into a sanctuary. It was mine, completely mine. But the real for a long time, I had been fueled by righteous anger. It had been my armor and my weapon. But once the war was over, I realized how heavy it was. The final plot twist of this story wasn't about him, it was about me. My victory wasn't the moment he was served those papers. The moment, months later, when I woke up, I hadn't thought about him at all. Anger had been understood then. He had forced me to unearth a strength I never knew I forgave myself for not seeing, for trusting a man who was never. My trust hadn't been a weakness. It was the best part of. He was just too small to deserve. Today, I am sitting in my favorite room. His old office, now my sun-drenched studio. The memories of what happened in this house no longer feel like ghosts. They're just stories, scars that have. What remains is the knowledge that I survived. I fought back, and I found my new beginning. Not in a party or a grand gesture, but in the quiet, steady rebuilding of a life that is authentic. This has been a long and difficult story to tell, and I'm so glad you were here to listen. It's a reminder that even when our worlds are burned to the ground, power to rise and build something. Thank you for hearing me out. Curious, as I sit here in my peaceful home in Brooklyn, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to be here for the next story, please subscribe so you won't miss.